President Biden pardoned his son Hunter. So we're going to talk about that. You're going to see what a couple of different lawyers think about that.
President Biden has pardoned his son Hunter. This is an abuse of power.
I disagree. It's a power inherent in the Constitution that the president has. I don't like it, but if you read what President Biden wrote, here is what President Biden said in the actual pardon. Today, I signed a pardon for my son Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making. He didn't, but he certainly interferes with the outcome of it. And I kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. I differ with President Biden's assessment of that. However, I see both sides of that. Without aggravating factors like use in a crime, multiple purchases, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser, people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. That may be true. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions but then paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties are typically given non-criminal resolutions. I think that's also true. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. Now, in this, he's trying to point all of this towards the taxes and gun charges. I don't think that's all that this pardon does, though. The charges in his case came about only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Then a carefully negotiated plea deal agreed to by the Department of Justice unraveled in the courtroom, with a number of my political opponents in Congress taking credit for bringing political pressure on the process. Had the plea deal held, it would have been a fair, reasonable resolution of Hunter's cases. No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. If a son or child of a president was singled out purely because they are the son of the or child of the president, that is wrong. You'll notice, though, we're going to talk about what was done to Donald Jr. and the Trump family in this as well. But he continues, there has been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. I don't know if he's been 5.5 years sober, and why was all that cocaine found in the White House, and whose was that we never got any information about? How do you find that much cocaine? Could it have been a plant? Sure. It'd be easier for somebody to plant that than for it to even have been Hunter? Sure, but it's a big question. In trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here. Enough is enough. Based on that logic, I see why the pardon happened. The fact that for years and years and years he says he wasn't going to do it is a whole different story, and was a story. So he continues, for my entire career, I followed a simple principle. Just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice. And once I made this decision this weekend, there was no sense in delaying it further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision. I sure do. I really do understand that. I don't disagree with his decision. However, the number one person that you should have pardoned or just instructed the Justice Department to not be prosecuting are these crap sham prosecutions against Donald Trump. If he doesn't pardon him before the end of this, that's just completely improper. Any prosecutions, and then taking Donald Jr. about talking with Russia and the whole Russia scam, the hypocrisy and the unilateral making sure that he's taking care of his son versus still prosecuting and having tried to prosecute his political opponent and not providing the pardon there. It's a dual system of justice. So he pardons. It's a full and unconditional pardon for those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024. Including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted, including any that have resulted in convictions by special counsel in D.C. So what period does that cover? That also covers the entire time that he was on the board of Burisma. Is this also potentially Joe Biden trying to cover himself? Maybe. Do we even know whether Joe Biden knows he was on the takes or even thinks that's anything wrong? Or has anybody talked to him about that? Is he actually worried about that? Who knows? Because a lot of people are speculating that, oh, this is the way to stop the investigation of whether Joe Biden has been and was taking bribes. And with all what went on with the energy company in the Ukraine. So I want to go back. Do I think it's an abuse of power? No. I think it's a power that the president has. Is there truth in, was Hunter Biden politically prosecuted? Probably. Has the Trump family suffered that times many multiples? They sure have.
This is a complicated situation, but there should be one simple rule that we should force our politicians to adhere to. Presidents should not use their...
He's using the S word, should. We don't live in the world of should, because presidential pardon power shouldn't be necessary at all, because the justice system should work perfectly. The justice system does not work perfectly. That's the problem. We're balancing a lot of different factors. And we're balancing a lot of different factors of, one, we can never actually know the truth. And two, even if we know the truth, how much prosecution and punishment should there be versus how much forgiveness should there be? What is the goal of the justice system? Is it to simply punish and get revenge? And does revenge make somebody feel better? Do two wrongs make a right? Is it wrong? What is right? Is forgiveness right? What did Jesus tell us to do? How do you balance all that when you have a variety of different opinions and ideas and millions of people? So is the system perfect? Oh no, far from. It's a check and a balance, and it's inherently held in a human being that is designated as the president, that was put there by, hopefully, a free and fair election by the people. And that's the power that is given to that person. And it prevents things like major injustices and gives second chances. So we entrust that to governors for state prosecutions, and we entrust that to the president for national prosecutions. He can't pardon someone for a state crime. He can only pardon them for a federal crime. And so it's a balancing in order to prevent the evils that can come from a justice system.
Presidents should not use their office for personal gain. Now, it's debatable whether this is...
Not use their office for personal gain, you mean like how the Clinton Foundation did, or how Hunter Biden, who's on the board of Burisma, an energy company, even though he had never had anything to do with energy, and who was only hired for that because of what his last name was, and in order to try and influence the president, and then all of a sudden now we're giving hundreds of billions of dollars to the Ukraine? You mean like that?
Now, it's debatable whether this is a norm or an aspiration, but even if it's not codified anywhere, we should force our politicians to adhere to this rule. This isn't the first...
That is imaginary.
This isn't the first political or self-interested pardon, and it certainly won't be the last. But there is no argument that this is not a self-interested pardon. This is a pardon for the president's son because he is the president's son. And look, it is completely understandable that an aging father doesn't want to see his only surviving son go to jail for what might be the rest of that father's life. But it is as understandable as it is indefensible.
I don't think it's indispensable. I think it is defensible with what Biden has written in the pardon. That's the defense. He wrote the defense in the pardon, and he has the ability and power to do it.
Biden is a father, but more importantly, he is the president of the United States. And this use of the president's power should be unacceptable.
Should, but it isn't. And we don't live in the world of should. That's the problem. That's why you have to hire lawyers anyway, to deal with that's not what should happen. I shouldn't have to do that. Right. But you do. For example, in a divorce, you should have had a healthy marriage. You shouldn't need a divorce. There shouldn't be anything such as a divorce. There shouldn't be any evil in the world. There shouldn't be people who use their free will in order to hurt other people. We shouldn't need any laws whatsoever. We should just live on this earth like we did in the Garden of Eden. But that's not what we live in. We live in the world of reality. And the presidential pardon is a balance. You might not like that he pardoned Hunter. Might not like who a lot of people pardoned. The Democrats were criticizing Donald Trump for him pardoning, and I believe that Donald Trump pardoned less than 300 people. Barack Obama pardoned a whole lot more people than President Trump did. And typically, Republicans don't like who Democrats pardon, and Democrats don't like who Republicans pardon. This is part of it. This is part of the system that we have.
In the accompanying statement the president issued, he made it clear that he believes that Hunter Biden was, quote, selectively and unfairly prosecuted simply because he is his son. The president wrote in part, quote, I also believe raw politics has infected this process and it led to a miscarriage of justice. Now, there's no dispute that legally the president does have the power to issue this pardon. But this kind of unchecked pardon power is wrong, and President Biden knows that.
But there's a really important reasons why it's there. And it's also wrong for an innocent person to sit on death row. It's wrong for a lot of things that happen, and it's always going to be a balance. There's going to be some level of injustice in the legal system, and trying to prevent one thing, you create an unintended consequence somewhere else.
And President Biden knows that it's wrong.
I don't know that Biden knows that it's wrong. I don't think that Biden probably thinks that it's wrong. I don't think Biden necessarily has the cognitive ability nor the situational or political awareness to have necessarily even thought it through that much.
And there's one surefire way to know, which is that Joe Biden said he wouldn't issue this pardon over and over again.
With regard to the question regarding the family, I'm extremely proud of my son Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know, and I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
President Biden swore several times that he would not pardon Hunter because he believed in the due process of law. And now he's changed his mind, undermining the rule of law and lending credence to Trump's claims that nothing matters and justice is fake. Now, this isn't the first political and arguably corrupt pardon. 88% of Trump's pardons went to people with personal ties to the president or to people that furthered his political agenda, including notably the pardon that Trump issued to Jared Kushner's father, who Trump says he's going to nominate as the ambassador to France. George H.W. Bush pardoned 6 people involved in the Iran-Contra scandal. Bill Clinton pardoned his brother Roger Clinton, though that was for a crime that occurred 15 years before, which he had already gone to jail. And of course, there are more on the horizon. To it, Donald Trump says he's going to pardon the January 6 rioters, who of course rioted to make Donald Trump president again. But to say that both sides do it or get...
Here's a very good example when he talks about the January 6 people. So his opinion definitely differs from mine. One, to call them rioters. Some people were rioting. A lot of people just were at the Capitol and just walked in and were escorted in by police. There's a whole lot. And once you watch those videos, you saw that the justice system against those people, if you want to talk about what's skewed, look at what happened during the Black Lives Matter riots in Portland, and when a police station was burned down, no one was prosecuted for that, or very few, as opposed to anybody that happened to walk through the Capitol and be looking around. All those people have to go to jail. The amount of political prosecution in that is unparalleled in the history of the United States. So should those people be pardoned? Absolutely. That's justice being done. That's why the pardon power exists. Like I said, Democrats don't like when Republicans pardon. Republicans don't like when Democrats pardon.
But to say that both sides do it or get bogged down in a question of who does it worse belies the fact that this is always unjust.
I am a conservative person and an attorney, and I'm not siding with Joe Biden. I don't think it is as particularly bad as this is being portrayed.
And this one is arguably particularly bad. The point is that this is exactly what you would expect from Donald Trump, and exactly why the Biden pardon is wrong. And as we
So he's vilifying Donald Trump. It's not what I would expect from Donald Trump.
As we explained at the time, Trump's pardon spree at the end of his first term was completely corrupt. He rewarded friends, he undermined prosecutors, and he completely covered up everything related to Russiagate. And I take the point that
I completely disagree. And that Russia thing was proven was a total scam.
Russiagate. And I take the point that Trump probably did it more, but a world where we're tallying up the...
So he thinks that Trump probably did it more. Here's the truth of the matter. If you look at these numbers, 3,687 by FDR, Democrat. 2,480 by Woodrow Wilson, Democrat. 2,044 by Truman, Democrat. 1927 by Barack Obama. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 pardons. The top 4 pardoning presidents. Let's look at more recent. LBJ, 1187. He's 8th on the list. Nixon, only 926, not even 1,000. John F. Kennedy, who wasn't even there the whole time, 575. Jimmy Carter, 566. Bill Clinton, 459. Ronald Reagan only pardoned 406. Abraham Lincoln only pardoned 343. What party was Lincoln? Republican. Donald Trump, 238 pardons. So this guy is on here saying 238 pardons was a problem when Barack Obama has pardoned 1,927, almost 10 times as many people that Barack Obama pardoned. George Washington only pardoned 16 people. James A. Garfield, William Henry Harrison, and pardoned none. And we don't have Joe Biden's number yet. George W. Bush, 200. George H.W. George Bush Sr. only pardoned 77, and there's been 46 presidents.
The pardons to see who's worse is one where we all lose. And I also take the president's point that it's reasonable to believe that aspects of Hunter's prosecution was unjust. But it's also hard to argue that it was completely outside of the realm of prosecutorial discretion. There are aspects of the prosecution that are a stretch. For example, 18 U.S.C. 922G, which is the gun crime that Hunter was prosecuted for, which says that an addict cannot be in possession of a gun, is totally incompatible with the Supreme Court's Bruin decision. And some circuits have come to that conclusion. But it's still on the books and it's still a crime where Hunter Biden was prosecuted. And there are those that say the tax prosecution was overly harsh. President Biden states that it would have been fair if the plea deal had held, and that's definitely true. But it's also true that if a plea deal blows up, as it did here, that could lead to harsher carceral punishments. And in either case, Hunter did the crimes. He even wrote a book about it. And sure, the vast majority of people that have been charged with these crimes have been fined and have avoided jail, but they're still punished under these laws. Perhaps not as severely, but there's no question that he committed these acts and that those acts are currently crimes. But I'm also fine with a rule that says the president and their family are subject to more strict rules by virtue of their position. Perhaps there is an element of the investigation, the prosecution, that singled Hunter out. So be it. But the Republicans and the prosecutors were never able to prove that President Biden benefited from his son's indiscretions.
Well, not yet, because none of them have been trying to do that. It's been Biden's Justice Department.
But it is reasonable to question those links. If that means increased scrutiny and accountability into the president and their family, I think that's actually a good thing. And you know what, by that same token, I'd love to probe the agreement that the Saudi government has with Jared Kushner right after he left the first Trump administration that's worth $2 billion. That seems kind of sketchy. But in any event, a largesse from a foreign government to the president's family is a reasonable thing to investigate and sometimes prosecute. And look, it is understandable as to why President Biden did this. There's real risk that the second Trump administration would have tried to score political points by doubling down on the prosecution of Hunter Biden.
I doubt it. I don't think that President Trump would do that. He had the opportunity to do that with Hillary Clinton, and he said on multiple occasions that it would not be right to put the family member or the wife of the former president in jail, and that the best revenge is success.
I don't care about the revenge thing. I know they usually use the word revenge. Will there be revenge? My revenge will be success.
I don't think he's interested in that. I don't think he cares about it at this point. I don't think he's interested in playing those particular political games. I think those political games are only brought up by other people. It's my opinion. But I don't think President Trump would be interested in doing that at all.
Especially now that Trump has said he's going to nominate Kash Patel as the head of the FBI. But those are supposed to be the risks. You either believe in the institution and the Department of Justice and the rule of law and let it run its course, or you don't.
The pardon power, again, is a check on balance on the fact that that is not a perfect or damage-free type of process.
And it looks like President Biden doesn't. But if that was the real concern, then the pardon could have been drafted as to only apply to uncharged crimes. It could have left the current convictions intact.
That's true.
Which remain and need to be sentenced, but could have headed off any politicized investigations into new trumped-up charges. This pardon and the justifications for it are also going to retroactively paint the Trump prosecutions in a tainted light. Based on everything—
They already are painted in a tainted light. The reason why a large majority of people voted for President Trump was because it was absolutely clear that those political prosecutions, especially Fani Willis's one, where they couldn't even identify what the crime was, and the fact that had taken out a loan, he valued a piece of property. The piece of property was also valued by the bank, who went into this with absolute open eyes and open arms. They got paid back with interest, and there was absolutely no damages, and they're trying to prosecute and call President Trump a felon. They only did that to try and get him to stay off the ballot because they knew they couldn't beat him again. Period. My opinion, but seems like a factual matter to me.
Based on everything that we know today, it appears that the federal Trump prosecutions were remarkably apolitical. And not to mention—
This guy is nuts, if that's what he thinks.
And not to mention, much of the prosecutions were based on what was just plainly out in the open. But the prosecutions were unusual only in the sense that a president has never committed these types of crimes before, not that they were being prosecuted. But many will now reasonably look to the justifications for this pardon and say, see, Biden's DOJ is corrupt. If the president himself says that the Department of Justice is political and selectively prosecutes his son, it is much harder to defend the Trump prosecutions.
That's a good point.
Which is a tragedy because, love him or hate him, Attorney General Merrick Garland appears to have bent over backwards to make the Trump prosecutions as apolitical and as institutional.
That's nuts. That is a complete fallacy.
And as institutional as possible. But the fact is, Hunter Biden was not selectively prosecuted. And here's the thing, neither was Trump.
Yes, he definitely was. And how many million people that voted for him all believe that?
President Biden threw his own Department of Justice under the bus and claimed that it was selective prosecution. Now, I don't really think that this will change any of Trump's behavior or actions in the future, but it will give cover to a lot of people who will say that both were selective. And the history books aren't written yet, and the people are going to debate the Trump prosecutions for decades. And I think the narrative matters, not the least of which because there is an entire right-wing ecosphere that lives in an alternate reality that's hell-bent on painting their felonious president as a saint. And yes, President Biden...
Wow. Who do you think he voted for?
And yes, President Biden is a dad, and that explains his actions, but it doesn't excuse them. I would be outraged if Trump pardons himself or his children.
I wouldn't.
And that's why I'm outraged at President Biden today. At base, the pardon power should be abolished.
I disagree, wholeheartedly disagree. I remember even being in law school and seeing how the justice system works and all the different corruption and things like that. There has to be that check and balance. The pardon power is extremely important and it needs to remain, my opinion.
It never should have existed in the first.
That's with, clearly I'm a conservative and Joe Biden pardoned his son, and I have been, in contradiction in this video, have been defending his ability to do that. It's a political choice that he made, but he should have the choice. The president should have the choice because that is a proper balance. May or may not like it that he used it in the way that he did, but it's a power that needs to remain. Otherwise, the justice system can result in such tremendous injustice that there has to be that check and balance on it. And to not prosecute Hunter Biden, whether he deserves it or not for those particular crimes, as opposed to the ability for that pardon power to create actual justice because the justice system tended to or went too far, or you have a prosecutor that it's so easy to convict. It's really easy to convict. And they have this ultimate power. They can choose who they want to prosecute. They can get a jury that's seated that's going to prosecute them, whether they did it or not. And the power to ruin other people's lives has to have that check and balance. The pardon power should and must remain. And I will not be persuaded by that. The fact that a president uses 10,000 pardons for people for whatever the particular reasons are.
In the first place, it's an anachronism of history. And I guess I'm just sad. Institutions and norms are being torn to shreds in front of our eyes. And look, I recognize that the fault for that is not evenly distributed. But this is a race to the bottom. People are not being...
I disagree. He's making this a lot bigger deal than it is. It's a political question.
Being punished for corruption and manifest illegality. We see that with the end of the Trump prosecutions.
What corruption? The fact that he took out a loan for a piece of property and then you say that the piece of property is worth $1 million, Mar-a-Lago is worth $1 million. I guarantee you $20 million. I could come up with $20 million to buy Mar-a-Lago. It's worth tremendously more than that. That prosecution was garbage and nothing but politically motivated. But he's a Democrat. He wants it to happen. So he's going to say, oh, it's wrong. No. It's that the fact that prosecution happened is wrong.
Decisions of the Supreme Court regarding immunity, and we're likely to see that here with this pardon. On the spectrum,
if you don't have the immunity of the president, then our country is going to be destroyed. It's the next king comes in and kills the previous king, like always was happening. Study history, and you realize why that's important.
On the spectrum of too many prosecutions of politicians to not enough prosecutions of politicians, we are currently...
A prosecution of a politician happens in the voting box. That's why making sure that voting integrity is there, making sure that only citizens vote, making sure that every vote is counted, that no one who's not supposed to vote does actually get to vote, that there is no corruption in the actual voting process, and we remove and prosecute a politician by removing them from the office.
We are currently way on the side of not enough. And here there probably won't be dramatic consequences, and that is a problem. It's one in a long line of things that should be punished by the electorate, but are currently not.
How has that not been punished by the electorate? Joe Biden is out of office. He's a lame duck. Everybody knows he gets those pardons. He's got another month that he's 6 weeks, he's in office. So he's been punished. Kamala Harris was punished. In fact, Joe Biden was punished by his own party because he did so badly in an election, and he's obviously got cognitive decline. Again, my opinion, you decide for yourself.
But are currently not. This kind of behavior, whether it is from President Biden or former President Trump, should have made either of the candidates unelectable. But we aren't rewarding people for doing.
I don't know if it's even the behavior of the candidates. I think a lot of that is the nature of the situation and the nature of the job and the nature of politics, and the fact that people were using lawfare against their political opponents, regardless of what side does it. But I think it was really clear, and the electorate has spoken about what they thought about it being used against President Trump.
But we aren't rewarding people for doing the right thing, and we're not punishing people for doing the wrong thing. And unfortunately, I don't see that trend changing anytime soon. And as I said at the beginning, there's no dispute that the president actually possesses this power. But we're in really bad shape as a country if the rule is, if you're legally allowed to do it, then you can and should do it. I guess it's a good reminder that so much of what we've come to respect in our society and in our government is not about the law as it's explicitly written down, but is just a norm that we've grown accustomed to.
What he's talking about is he wants some kind of norm that we supposedly are accustomed to. The problem is he's overlooking the fact that in the entire history of the country, there have been thousands and thousands of these types of pardons. This is just one that he happens to not like. So in much of what is a problem with the United States or with humanity at all is an overreaction to one bad example. You are going to have problems one way or the other. The problems that you would have by removing the pardon power are far worse than the problems that you have when something like this happens, which is why the president pardoning Hunter Biden doesn't particularly bother me that much, because I have the big picture in mind and understand what the benefits are. The benefits are is that this country doesn't get destroyed by the use of lawfare, by the fact that they're putting January 6 protesters into prison for political crimes, essentially. That if, with whatever the crimes were that Hunter Biden did, if that's not necessarily coming out well. And Joe Biden, there's a political consequence to that. He's what's in the lame duck situation. We are aware that in American politics, there are such things as lame duck situations. And Joe Biden and his legacy and whatever, from the time that the election happens until January 20th, so for 2 months, there is this limbo where he has received the message, sorry, but you're gone, and your successor in your party is gone. That's how great of a job that you did, but he still has this window of opportunity to do and pardon and finish this out. And he's going to leave a legacy of, he pardoned his son, and he's got to deal with that politically and his memory and his family. There are consequences of that. But do we change the system for that? No, we should not. Because then you're going to fix this little problem, and then you're going to create a tidal wave of massive other unintended consequences later. The pardon power is important. It's limited to 51 people. It's limited to the president and then the 50 state governors. The governors can pardon for state crimes, and the president can pardon for national crime. One whole person has that power, and he's going to use it. And he was elected and given that power. So elections have consequences. Maybe you should have listened to people ahead of time that told you he wasn't the right person to put in there, and you should have voted for somebody else. It is what it is. It's not that the system and the country is getting ruined because of a pardon. You're way overreacting, if that's what you think.
And I wish I had more for you, but this is going to get worse before it gets better.
I disagree. So I'm definitely not so pessimistic about it. And I think that what's about to happen in the country is we're going to have a lot better health. I have a lot of faith in what Robert Kennedy is going to do. I have a lot of faith what Elon Musk is going to do. And I think that the people that Donald Trump are putting in place are going to do a great job. I hope that the Attorney General doesn't get overzealous. I don't think that they're going to. And I hope that there are not going to be political prosecutions that are happening. I really hope and pray, because a lot of Americans live in fear of false and malicious prosecutions or political prosecutions. That is subjugation. That is oppression. And we do not want to live as an oppressed people. We don't want to live underneath a king. We want to live as free people that can pursue our goals spiritually, financially, intellectually, with our families, and we want to grow to be the best people that we can be. So I am not pessimistic. I would be scared probably if politics had swung the other way, but I think that in society right now, people are really starting to see the truth, and people are socially, things have swung far more to the left than what they used to be. Economically, they are winding up balancing out well. And I think that the future of the country, there's a lot of different things that are going to be very, very difficult. What is cryptocurrency going to do? How is the Fed and interest rates and our industry, and what are they going to do with tariffs and war going to happen? Are they going to really end the wars in the Middle East? Is Israel going to be able to be protected, or are they going to be, try to be wiped out entirely? Is Russia and Ukraine going to figure out their border dispute? Are the wars and conflicts in Africa going to subside? Are the drug wars and the drug dealers and the human trafficking, is all of that going to subside? These are the problems that we've got in the world and the country right now. But as a whole, all in all, throughout the world, mankind has never, on a whole, been as prosperous and as blessed and as gifted as the vast majority of us can be now. And I think that that's only getting better. More people have come out of poverty in the last 100 years than in any time in the history of the world. So focus on the positive. Look at what the positive things are, and what happens in your house is much more important than what happens in the White House. So focus on what you can do. You can get better. Watch the content that we provide that helps you to get discernment and wisdom. And we're going to teach as much of that as we can on the limited time that we have in order to bless you. So thank you for watching. Please put what your thoughts are in the comments. I'll be really interested in this one. Share the podcast, help other people like and subscribe to the show. And this is the Lawyer Dana Show.